The story begins with Shiki, a teenage high school student who was expelled due to his frequent fights with classmates. While talking on the phone with a friend, he pretends not to be bothered by getting expelled from school. Moments later, Shiki's dad storms into the room and smacks him on the head after overhearing his phone call and realizing he got expelled from school again. He can't believe Shiki messed up like this. He tries to hit him a second time out of anger, but Shiki quickly dodges and leaps back onto his bed to avoid it. After calming down, his father still demands an explanation from Shiki about his expulsion. He also questions how Shiki obtained all the guns stored in his room, emphasizing that they own a liquor store, not an armory. Finally, he warns Shiki to change his behavior before it destroys his future. But Shiki didn't like those words, and he snaps back at his dad, shouting that he's glad they're not related by blood because he'd never want to turn out like him. That final words cut deep. And Shiki can tell he went too far the moment the words leave his mouth, before either of them can say anything else. The phone rings downstairs in the liquor store. Shiki's dad runs. He goes to pick it up and is surprised to hear someone placing a large beer order. Since he doesn't usually get much business, he's more than happy to take it. He gets into his car to deliver the package, and as soon as Shiki notices him driving away, he begins murmuring, regretting how events unfolded. Suddenly, a loud crash echoes outside his room, and before he knows it, a black mist wraps around him like a rope, dragging him out onto the street. Shiki is dazed from the fall, barely grasping what's happening when a mysterious man from the smoke. The man apparently recognizes him. Out of nowhere, a car slams into the man, pinning him against the wall. As the man is unconscious, Shiki's father shouts at him to jump in now. Without hesitation, Shiki jumps into his dad's car, but once things seem to have calmed down, he has a few questions. First, he demands to know why some random guy just dragged him out onto the street, and more importantly, why his dad acted so casually about running the guy over like it was no big deal. Shiki's father insists that someone like Samadare wouldn't be killed by a mere car crash. Still confused, Shiki struggles to process everything until his dad finally reveals the truth. He explains that Shiki is descended from an Oni, while Samadare comes from the bloodline of Momotaro. That's why Samadare is so determined to hunt him down. Shiki is too shocked to respond, and while there's still a lot more to explain, but his father doesn't have time to elaborate. Samadare has already caught up to them. A creeping black mist envelops the car, causing it to malfunction. With no other choice, Shiki's dad stops in a nearby abandoned factory, desperate to escape before the car gives out completely. After they get out, Shiki glances back and sees the car completely engulfed in that same strange black mist. But before he can ask what it is, the car suddenly explodes in a massive fireball. Amid all the chaos, Shiki's dad looks away for just a moment, and in that brief instant, Samadare manages to take Shiki. Inside the factory, Samadare traps Shiki mid-air using his black mist shaped like a spider web. When Shiki asks him what's going on, he coldly replies that anyone with Oni blood is just a pest that needs to be wiped out. With that, Samadare prepares to finish Shiki off for good. But before Samadare can strike, Shiki's father arrives to stop him. As he steps in, he reveals that the stories of Momotaro and the Oni are real, and their conflict has been ongoing for thousands of years. Over time, the descendants of Momotaro have continued the mission of eradicating the Oni, which led to the creation of the Momotaro Agency. Shiki remains puzzled by everything, but his father never assumed a boy like him would grasp it right away. For the moment, he instructs Shiki to stay back while he deals with Samadare. However, the moment Samadare hears Shiki's dad plans to confront him, he summons two swords from the dark mist and lunges forward with incredible speed. However, Shiki's father counters by summoning his own mist blade, deflecting the strike. The black mist is a distinctive ability exclusive to Momotaro's descendants. Shiki's dad was once part of the Momotaro Agency and even fought alongside Samadare in the past. His real name, Tsuyoshi Momotaro. However, he abandoned that life years ago to raise Shiki far from the agency's reach. Sadly, he was never going to be able to keep Shiki hidden forever. Samadare then questions Tsuyoshi, asking if he's forgotten how dangerous the Oni really are, but Tsuyoshi has no interest in discussing it. His only concern now is keeping Shiki safe. Tsuyoshi holds his own against Samadare for a while, but eventually, Samadare finds an opening and slashes his chest in a flash. Tsuyoshi collapses to the ground, unconscious, leaving Shiki horrified by what he's just seen. Shiki yells at Samadare for hurting his father. Samadare then shifts his focus back to him, ready to end it. But just as he moves in, Tsuyoshi, using the last of his strength, grabs Samadare's leg to stop him from reaching his son. Samadare demands to know why Tsuyoshi would risk so much to protect a child with Oni blood. But Tsuyoshi responds that a father doesn't need a reason to shield his son. He acknowledges that Shiki might not the best person, and yes, he has Oni blood, but he's never harmed anyone. With that in mind, Tsuyoshi challenges Samadare, asking how he could justify killing a kid. Tsuyoshi's words cut deep, stirring up the guilt Samadare has been carrying lately, but he refuses to hear any more. He summons his sword, ready to strike Tsuyoshi down. Shiki can do nothing but watch in despair as his father faces death at Samadare's hands, and the only thing racing through Shiki's mind is an overwhelming desire to kill Samadare. Blood starts pouring from every part of Shiki's body as his mind is consumed by pure hatred. By the time Samadare looks back at him, Shiki has vanished. Suddenly, Samadare hears the sound of multiple guns cocking right beside his head. Startled, he instinctively leaps backward, barely dodging the attack, but he still has no clue Shiki's whereabouts. At that moment, a drop of blood hits the ground. Samadare looks up, only to see Shiki clinging to the ceiling. He's stunned that Shiki managed to unlock his Oni powers and manipulate his own blood so quickly. But the real terror lies in what these abilities mean: the loss of humanity. Without it, Oni are utterly merciless, and Shiki is no exception. Samadare raises his sword, bracing for Shiki's next move. But as Shiki begins launching blood missiles at him, Samadare quickly realizes he's outmatched and starts to retreat. He manages to get out of the blast zone just in time, but the fight is far from over. Shiki bursts through the smoke and delivers a powerful kick that sends Samadare flying into some rubble. Shiki then looms over Samadare and unleashes a devastating barrage of gunfire. The entire warehouse is obliterated in the chaos, yet somehow, Samadare survives the onslaught. Even more unexpectedly, Shiki reverts back to his human form. Confused, he looks down at himself, puzzled by the blood covering his body. A typical reaction, as he has no memory of what happened during his transformation, and Samadare plans to take advantage of the confusion to finish Shiki off before he transforms again. He begins charging towards Shiki, all repeating that all Oni must be eliminated with no exceptions. Shiki isn't able to control this transformation at will yet, so he is pretty much a useless. Just as the blade is about to land, Tsuyoshi throws himself in the way and takes the blow. Samadare is stunned that Tsuyoshi would risk his life for an Oni, but Shiki's dad reflects on the cherished memories he shared with Shiki and feels at peace, believing his life has been meaningful. Exhausted by the battle and aware that their clash is attracting unwanted attention, Samadare decides to retreat. To protect the secrecy of the Momotaro agency, he disappears into a cloud of black mist. After Samadare disappears, Tsuyoshi falls into Shiki's arms, and he grows deeply concerned. He quickly says he'll call for help, but Tsuyoshi stops him, explaining that no one can help him now. It's already too late. All he wants is to have one final conversation with Shiki before he goes. With his remaining strength, Tsuyoshi apologizes for hiding the truth all these years. It wasn't an easy thing to confess, but now, with his time running out, he can't stand by Shiki's side any longer. His final wish is for Shiki to get strong enough to crush both the Momotaro clan and the Oni. Only then will you truly be free. Shiki screams at his father, refusing to accept his dying words. He won't let him die. Not now. Determined, he lifts Tsuyoshi up and starts carrying him to the hospital. Seeing how much Shiki cares brings a smile to Tsuyoshi's face, but his injuries are far too serious. After a few seconds, Tsuyoshi's body gives out completely, and he crumples to the ground. Shiki pleads with his father to wake up, desperately saying he hasn't had the chance to say sorry or make amends for the harsh words he said that morning. But it's no use. Tsuyoshi is already dead. Shiki breaks down, sitting beside his father's lifeless body. Suddenly, someone shows up behind him and tells him he can't stick around because there would be too many onlookers. Shiki is caught off guard and braces for another fight, but before he can even react, he's struck in the neck and immediately loses consciousness. At the same time, the heads of the Momotaro agency are in chaos after learning that Samadare couldn't kill Shiki. Some are even questioning whether he's losing his edge. However, considering the circumstances, they understand why he backed off. They can't risk exposing their organization to the public, so they're determined to keep the public from learning about the existence of Oni. That's why they plan to eliminate Shiki the moment he's within their reach. The problem is, that's easier said than done, because right now, Shiki was transported to a secluded island in the middle of nowhere, making him nearly impossible to track down now. The plan is to enroll Shiki in a school filled with other Oni like himself so he can properly develop his abilities. But before everything, Nato must conduct a detailed assessment to determine if Shiki is actually worth the effort. Still, the principal warns Nato to make sure none of them die before they're fully trained and ready for battle. A while later, Shiki regains consciousness and realizes he's tied to a chair, while the man behind him casually exercises using his umbrella. Strangely enough, this doesn't even come close to the most random thing Shiki has encountered. The man introduces himself as Nato, and now now that Shiki is awake, he says it's time to explain everything. First, he exposes his horns to prove to Shiki that they are both Oni. Then, he explains that Shiki was brought there for two purposes: evaluation and retrieval. As Shiki is aware, the Momotaro agency uses the black mist to hunt down honest like them. The person who killed Shiki's father was part of this organization, whose ultimate mission is to eradicate all Oni from the world. To counter them, the Oni agency was created, and Nato's role is to locate newly awakened Oni like Shiki and determine if they're suitable to join. That's essentially all there is to it. With that, Nato retrieves his board and loosens the bindings on Shiki's mouth so he can speak and ask questions. Once Shiki regains the ability to speak, he instantly starts shouting at Nato, demanding answers about his father's whereabouts. Irritated by all the yelling, Nato knocks a few points off Shiki's evaluation and explains that his father's body is securely stored. However, he adds bluntly that it doesn't really matter since the man is already dead. Shiki is struggling to break free, but that aggressive behavior is exactly why Nato restrained him to begin with, so there's no chance he'll be letting him go just yet. Shiki is furious, but he realizes that shouting won't do him any good. Shiki takes a moment to collect himself and calmly asks Nato to let him go, saying he has unfinished business with a guy who killed his father. But even though his voice is steady, the anger is still written all over his face, so Nato denies his request. On top of that, he knows Shiki wouldn't stand a chance against a Momotaro agent anyway. But if Shiki's so determined to throw his life away, Nato figures there's a better way to assess him. He removes his tie, and before Shiki can even react, Nato appears behind him and starts choking him with it. The test is simple. Shiki has to escape somehow. If he fails, he dies. Either outcome is fine by Nato. Shiki isn't about to let some stranger take his life. He fights desperately, even as blood starts filling his eyes. But in the end, he collapses unconscious. Nato is ready to choke the life out of him for good. But when Shiki blacks out, his subconscious takes control, triggering his Oni berserker state. Blood on the ground suddenly forms sharp spikes, forcing Nato to retreat. The moment he looks away, Shiki summons a machine gun and aims it straight at him. Shiki pulls the trigger without a second thought, but as the smoke clears, Nato stands untouched, protected by his umbrella. It's clear to him that Shiki hasn't mastered his abilities yet. The only way he can fight is by losing control and going berserk. Still, Nato sees this as the perfect moment to teach him a lesson, so he aims to restrain Shiki as gently as he can. When Shiki finally comes to, he notices his arm soaked in blood and Nato standing over him. He's completely confused about what just happened, but Nato isn't surprised. When an Oni goes berserk, they lose all awareness and tear through everything around them. That's exactly why the room is now covered in blood. Shiki still can't make sense of anything Nato is saying, and Nato's starting to suspect the guy might just be an idiot. To spell it out clearly, Nato sees Shiki as a clumsy brute with no grasp of how to control his blood, so he tells him he's officially disqualified. Shiki is seething over how things unfolded, but through his rage, one truth becomes undeniable. Nato is on a whole other level. There's no way Shiki can take him down alone, admitting that stings his pride, but if he wants to take on the Momotaro agency and avenge his father, he'll need every bit of help he can get. Shiki pushes down his pride and bows his head, pleading with Nato to take him on as a student, but Nato's already had enough of him and shuts him down right away. In a real fight, charging in without thinking is a death sentence, and someone like Shiki, who lost control and went berserk, wouldn't survive long. He can't manage his blood, and frankly, he's just an idiot. Nato has no interest in wasting time on a hopeless student like that. Now that Nato has realized Shiki is worthless, he can't afford to let an uncontrollable berserker stay alive, and must eliminate him. Shiki is shocked by Nato's words, but based on what he knows about him, he understands the threat is real. If he wants to live, he'll have to move fast. Shiki turns and bolts as Nato summons his blood umbrella, but he knows there's no way he'll get away before the attack hits, so instead, he charges straight at him. Nato figures the guy must have lost his mind. There's no way Shiki could win in a direct clash. To stop him, Nato summons a wall of spikes and quickly runs through all the possible moves Shiki might try. Attack from the side, leap over, or retrieve, because there's no getting through the spikes. And, just as Nato expected, Shiki goes for the jump, what Nato didn't see coming, though, was Shiki forming a gun in midair and firing a shot straight at his head from that range. Shiki feels a surge of pride for finally landing a hit on him, but the blood bullet doesn't actually do any damage. Nato's still far stronger, and the attack barely phases him. He's stunned that Shiki could command his own blood, but assumes it was just a fluke, especially since Shiki seems close to losing control again. The last thing he wants is another berserk outburst, so Nato readies his strongest move to take Shiki down quickly, but to his amazement, Shiki actually regains control, holding back his berserk state. Perhaps it wasn't just luck after all. Nato is baffled by Shiki's Shiki's success and demands an explanation. Shiki reveals that he simply mimicked Nato's technique after seeing him use his ring to cut his finger and summon the blood umbrella. He attempted the same. He mentally willed his arm to transform into a gun, and through sheer force of determination, it worked. Luckily for him, the gamble paid off. Nato struggles to accept that such a reckless approach actually succeeded, yet he can't argue with the results. Typically, an Oni must maintain perfect emotional control to prevent going berserk, which is why impulsive fighters like Shiki usually lose control and fall into chaos. But Shiki's not like the others. He didn't suppress his emotions. He overpowered them and forced his berserk mode to obey him. It's a rough and unrefined approach, but the strength it gave him was undeniably explosive. Shiki tells Nato that his only goal is to become strong enough to kill the man who murdered his father. So he makes a vow. If Nato makes him his underling, he'll give everything he's got to learn whatever Nato is willing to teach. Shiki's being completely sincere, and Nato can tell, but he still turns him down. What Shiki just pulled was basically a reckless gamble with his life, and he didn't have any kind of backup plan in case things went south. To Nato, that kind of recklessness still signals inexperience. Even so, he doesn't believe Shiki is entirely without potential. In the end, Nato decides to spare Shiki and take him on as a student, stopping the execution. He refuses to explain what exactly changed his mind, but the important thing is that he now sees real potential in Shiki, and Nato isn't the type to let raw talent go to waste. The island they're on is called Onigashima, and at its center lies Rosetsu Academy, a school created specifically for Oni. Nato explains that it's a military academy where Oni are trained to battle the Momotaro agency. But Shiki seems less interested in all that and more shocked by the realization that he's actually on an island. Nato jabs Shiki in the face for spouting nonsense, while he's still trying to explain things. He then announces that he's the homeroom teacher at the academy, which means he'll be responsible for Shiki and the rest of the students from now on. Shiki will have to live on campus, undergo training, and fight regularly to prepare himself for taking on the Momotaro agents, so he better be prepared. But Shiki's mind is overwhelmed by all the information Nato just threw at him. There's still plenty he doesn't fully grasp, but in the end, it doesn't matter to him. He'll do whatever it takes, as long as it means getting strong enough to take his revenge. A bit later, Nato takes Shiki to the locker room so he can change into his new school uniform. Shiki feels a little weird about it. He never thought he'd wear one again after getting expelled from his previous school. Nato then mentions that there are a few other students in his class, but out of everyone, Shiki is the least skilled, so he'd better avoid picking any fights. Shiki also asks about his dad, and Nato explains that the body is being kept in the morgue, and it's up to Shiki to decide on the funeral arrangements. Shiki's good mood fades the moment he's reminded of his father's death. However, Nato tells him there's no point dwelling on past regrets. Instead, he should channel that pain into getting stronger, so he never has to feel that kind of regret again. With that, Nato takes off on his skates, saying there's no time to waste, and that Shiki has just 15 seconds to get to class before he's late. Shiki complains that it's unfair, but knowing he has no other option, he sprints after him. They finally reach the classroom door, and Shiki starts thinking about the most impressive way to make his entrance. But Nato has no patience for that, and just kicks him through the door, causing Shiki to land face first on the floor and end up with a nosebleed. Noticing the blood, he immediately demands a tissue from the nearest person. Instead, Jin tells him to stay quiet, which instantly ticks Shiki off, prompting him to get right in Jin's face. Jin isn't the only student in the class. Others like Akari, Kuina, Juji, Rokuro, and Homer are here too, but at the moment, Shiki couldn't care less about them. His focus is solely on Jin, because he has unfinished business with him. Suddenly, Shiki and Jin realize they're sitting side by side, with Nato standing right behind them. Neither of them noticed him move, which leaves them both frozen in fear. Still, Shiki grumbles that he doesn't want to sit next to someone like Jin. Unfortunately, Nato has zero interest in Shiki's petty drama. Without missing a beat, he moves on with a class announcement, revealing that today's activity will be a simple game of tag. Shiki is baffled, wondering if came to this school to play games. Nato leads them outside and explains that this place is called the Shinra Forest. The rules are simple. They have 1 hour to return to school without being caught by him. Anyone he tags faces immediate expulsion. To even the odds, he promises not to use his blood abilities at all, while the students are free to use theirs as much as they want. But he issues a warning. If anyone loses control and goes berserk, he'll have no choice but to unleash his own power, and things will get ugly for them. Jin asks Nato, what if someone manages to kill Nato during the game? Nato replies that anyone skilled enough to take him down would earn instant graduation and the right to join any unit they choose. He casually dares them to try, but warns that he won't go down without a fight. Now that everyone knows about the rewards, they're all eager for the game. Shiki Shiki, however, feels a bit unsure since he's still adjusting, but a little hesitation won't hold him back. He's determined to try his hardest, so he tells Nato he's ready to start the game. Before starting, Nato adds one more rule. In order to complete the game, they would need to have claimed one of the cool blue orbs. He holds only 2 in hand and then throws them deep into the forest, after which he tells the students that if they don't end up finding one of the orbs before the end of the game, their victory would be pointless, even if they managed to reach the goal. The students notice that Nato only threw 2 balls into the forest. Even though there are 7 of them, they immediately assume he wants them to fight over blue orbs. However, Nato explains that he'll be splitting them into 3 groups because of this. The first group would consist of Homer, Shiki, and Jin. Group 2 would have Ikari and Juji. Finally, Group 3 would have Rokuro and Kuina. To make things more interesting, Nato says that groups 2 and 3 will have to share just 1 ball. Everyone immediately gets excited when they hear this, knowing it means at least 3 students will be expelled. Nato opens the gate and tells them to go in first. He'll follow 15 minutes later, but before they head in, Shiki complains about being teamed up with Jin, saying there's no way he's joining the team. Nato simply tells him if he can't work with the terms, he's going to be expelled. Homer then introduces herself to Shiki, giving off a timid vibe as she bows and says she'll do her best not to get in his way. But in response, Shiki just stares at her in awe. It's no surprise. He's been a total jerk since he was a kid, so girls have always kept their distance. But now, for the first time in years, a pretty girl has spoken to him, and he immediately vows to protect her no matter what. Homer blushes when she hears that and tells him not to go through all that trouble. She just wants to stay out of the way. Shiki, hearing this, feels like he's hit the jackpot. He's about to win over a girl who's not only pretty but also humble. Homer also introduces herself to Jin, but he completely ignores her, leaving her devastated. Shiki yells at Jin for making Homer cry, then does his best to cheer her up by calling her cute. Judging by the look on her face, it clearly works. She's happy. Shiki and Jin keep bickering until Nato cuts in, telling them to shut up and start the game already. Without hesitation, Jin and Shiki head inside. Homer, feeling a bit nervous, pauses for a moment before following them. As Jin dashes through the forest, he recalls Nato saying anyone that kills him would earn an instant graduation. He believes this is the perfect opportunity for him to get out of here quickly and avenge his family. Just then, Shiki sneaks up on him from behind and almost hits him with a really heavy stick. They stand opposite each other. What Shiki wants is for Jin to take back what he said about his reason for coming here being pointless. In an attempt to prove how strong he is, Jin takes off his mask and shows the scary scars he has on his mouth. But Shiki isn't intimidated by it because he feels showing off scars is something only weak people do. Jin then rips his arm open and 3 spinning blood chainsaws emerge from his arm. Shiki's eyes widen in surprise as he wonders how Jin is controlling his Oni blood with such ease. Jin can tell Shiki is intimidated by this. He tells Shiki to just run away if he's scared. That's when he learns that Shiki came all the way here to avenge his dead father. For that reason, Jin just believes they'll never understand each other. Shiki tries to control his blood too. He bites his finger and lets the blood seep out, but nothing happens. He just ends up embarrassing himself. He's furious that Jin can do it so easily while he can't. Shiki never was the kind of guy to back down from a fight, so he picks up his stick and charges Jin, giving it his all. Meanwhile, Homer is lost in the woods and starting to look really discouraged. She trips and falls flat on her face, saying that someone like her doesn't belong here. She briefly finds hope, remembering that Shiki said they'd work together, but quickly loses it again when she realizes she relies too much on others. Still, she keeps walking, unaware that she just passed one of the blue orbs she's supposed to collect. Meanwhile, the other students wait outside, wondering how things are going inside the forest. At the same time, Shiki and Jin are still brawling, and it's clear that Shiki is getting his butt kicked. Jin dodges every single one of Shiki's attacks. He's really frustrated at how Jin can control his blood so easily. Even the shape it takes when he controls it is far different from his. In the middle of the fight, his 2 brain cells click, where he realizes the shape of his blood is even different from Nato's. This makes him realize he can shape or form his blood as he wishes. But in the next moment, Jin smacks him across the face and knocks him out. Thinking he's won, Jin turns to walk away, but Shiki gets back up. Jin fires a blood slash at him, but at the worst possible moment, Homer steps into its path. Luckily, Shiki manages to pull her out of the way just in time. Homer lies on the ground, opens her eyes, and sees that Shiki got hurt protecting her. She's overwhelmed with guilt and begins bowing and apologizing over and over, but Shiki tells her not to worry. It was Jin's fault, not hers. By the time Shiki looks back at her, he sees a giant Oni monster appear on top of Homer. It kind of looks like a female titan. Homer remains on her knees and begs them both to run away from there as as quickly as they can, or else the monster is going to kill them. Meanwhile, Nato is bored waiting for Group 1 to finish. That's when he gets an unexpected visit from the school principal. The principal considers it quite bold of Nato to give his students a life or death assignment on the first day. Nato says he did that because he thinks training is more meaningful than wasting the whole day with explanations. Hearing that, the principal can tell Nato actually cares about the students and is doing this for their sake. Being an Oni isn't easy at all. Lots of them die every year and most of them are mere children. You could even get killed for just being related to one. The worst case are those that are taken alive and are used as test subjects in a lab. This is why Nato is doing his very best to shape these kids up as quickly as possible so they would be able to defend themselves. He believes as long as they're strong, they won't die. Meanwhile, Shiki and the others are in a tough spot now that the Oni Titan has gone berserk. Jin leaps up and tries to cut it down, but it's way too big, he doesn't stand a chance. Shiki asks Homer to just put an end to it, but unfortunately, she can't control it. She then collapses to the floor from too much blood loss. Shiki's first instinct is to run over there and pull her away, but on getting there, he's surprised to see that the Titan is actually protecting her. The Oni Titan then launches a heavy blood attack that sends both Shiki and Jin flying. Homer musters up some strength, calls out to the Titan, and refers to it as her sister. She begs it to stop all this destruction. As Shiki gets back up to his feet, Homer advises them to run away before they get killed. But Shiki says he's definitely not going to do that because it would mean she'll bleed out and die right before his eyes. He can't just leave her to die like that. Deep in the bushes, Nato watches from a distance and sees that this giant Titan is Homer's special blood ability. He's curious to see how the kids handle it. In the middle of the chaos, Shiki tries to summon his own blood ability, but it fails him again. Nato sees this and knows it won't work last time. Shiki only managed to pull it off by sheer luck. The Titan launches an attack by throwing several rocks at Shiki, sending him flying backwards. At this point, he starts to feel really pathetic. His father died just to protect him, but now he's still useless. He looks down while he starts to cry, saying being weak is so frustrating and humiliating. Just then, Jin walks forward and tells Shiki that if he's crying, he should go and do it somewhere else. Jin then draws his blood and summons two chainsaw weapons from his hands and is now face to face with the Oni Titan. He's still a bit shaken up from the last attack he took, but it's nothing he can't handle. Nato still watches from a distance and acknowledges that Jin creating two different weapon types at the same time would take serious control of his Oni blood. He's definitely got some experience. An Oni's blood can take literally any shape or strength. The image a person holds is transmitted from their brain, traveling not only through the nerves but also through the bloodstream, shaping itself accordingly. It's a simple signal from the brain. In some cases, people have their traumas reflected, while others reveal their preferences or tastes. Legend has it that what an Oni creates with their blood can even offer a glimpse into life itself. With that, the act of creating one's own unique weapon from their blood came to be known as the Blood Eclipse release. Back on the battlefield, Jin gets serious and uses his chainsaw to slice the Titan's arm while he's on top of it. When the time is right, he jumps in the air and uses his sword to slice the back of its neck, but the Titan manages to protect itself at the last second. Shiki remains on the sidelines, frustrated that he can't figure out how to use his blood technique. That's when his two brain cells finally click. All the weapons Jin forms are designed for cutting, but an Oni's weapons are supposed to be unique and personal to them. Shiki has always had a thing for guns. Even during his assessment test, he managed to create one from his blood. Putting all this together, it has to be the answer. Meanwhile, Jin is busy fighting the female Titan. She lets out a piercing screech at a frequency that bursts his eardrums. Nato continues to watch the fight and sees that things are about to get a little out of hand. He's thinking about stopping the test and just expelling them all, but that's when Shiki comes out of nowhere and unveils a giant bazooka attached to his arm. Nato is shocked to see he managed to figure it out so quickly. The Titan tries to smash him, but Shiki quickly shifts position and fires a blazing blast that obliterates the Titan in a single shot. Blood splatters everywhere. Shiki has a bright smirk on his face. Neither Nato nor Jin can believe their eyes. Shiki just proved everyone wrong. As it begins to rain, he notices Homer lying unconscious on the ground. He immediately rushes to help her, but his body is so weak that he falls flat on his face. Nato suddenly appears, telling him that he's paralyzed because he just used a ridiculous amount of his blood at once. What Shiki did was extremely dangerous and could have gotten him killed. Despite that, Shiki still tries his best to look tough by standing up, but immediately falls back down. Nato warns him that using too much blood at once could be fatal. Shiki still can't control his blood properly and has a long way to go. Nato advises him to take things easy from now on. Still, Nato can't deny that the attack Shiki used a few minutes ago was incredibly powerful. Shiki tells Nato not to worry so much about him. Instead, he wants all the attention focused on making sure Homer is alright. He insists they can take care of him only after she's been helped. Hearing this, Nato feels shocked and confused, wondering why someone who nearly died would still worry so much about others. Just then, Jin sneaks up from behind and tries to chop Nato's head off, but Nato luckily blocks it in time. After putting some distance between them, Jin asks Nato why he's wasting his time worrying about them. Jin doesn't care who gets hurt along the way. All that matters to him is achieving his goal, no matter the cost. Nato casually opens his umbrella, saying he prefers to treat all his students equally, but guys like Jin seriously piss him off. Jin confirms with Nato one last time that if he manages to kill him, he would graduate instantly and get assigned to the squad of his choice. Nato agrees to the terms. He even says he'll not use his blood techniques at all to defend himself. Without wasting any time, Jin charges at Nato and attacks with his chainsaws, but Nato swiftly blocks every strike with his umbrella. Their fight continues back and forth, with Nato defending each attack effortlessly. After creating some distance again, Jin rushes in once more, but this time, just before Jin attacks, Nato clicks his umbrella, releasing a thick cloud of smoke that blinds Jin temporarily. Nato tells Jin not to worry, the smoke isn't poisoned, it's just regular smoke. Jin can tell he's using the smoke to launch a surprise attack on him. His plan is to cut him in half the moment he tries to get close to him, but just then, he gets hit in the arm with a ton of rubber bullets. Nato observed that Jin is all about close combat, so he decides to keep his distance with long-range attacks. He's only hitting him with rubber bullets, but since he hurt his arm while fighting the Titan, Nato is sure it hurts like hell. However, Jin still has one more trick up his sleeve. He unleashes his new blood eclipse release and hurls several spinning blades at Nato. Nato dodges them with ease, but is surprised that Jin found a way to counter long-range defense. Their fight escalates into the air, and Jin sneaks up behind him, trying to end it all, but Nato catches him off guard with another surprise smoke grenade. Jin lands in the middle of the smoke-covered ground and immediately assumes that Nato will try to snipe him from the north, but Nato sneaks up from behind and lands a solid punch to his back, sending him flying. As Nato walks toward him, he says that assuming your opponent will always attack from a distance is a good way to get yourself killed. Jin was an easy target because he kept favoring his right arm. Nato tells him his biggest mistake was thinking he could win this fight while injured. Then, he uses his special umbrella to trap Jin, but Jin has used so much blood that he's too weak to even break free. Shiki observes the entire thing and is left speechless. Nato continues to speak, telling Jin that if this was a real battle, he would have been dead. Along the lines, Nato reveals that Jin is going to such extreme lengths just to see his father again. Jin is shocked that he knows this. Nato explains that he did a bit of digging and found out everything, like the fact that Jin's father is a Momotaro. Shiki hears this and is stunned. Now that his secret is out, Jin decides there's no point hiding anything anymore. He begins by saying his dad was a miserable bastard who took everything from him, his family and his dreams. The scars all over Jin's body are painful reminders carved into him by his father, and the hatred he's felt since childhood has never faded. As a kid, he barely survived, living off scraps he found in street dumpsters. Now, the only purpose driving him forward is to kill his father. Only then will he feel whole. The backstory gives Jin an adrenaline rush, so he quickly breaks free from the umbrella prison. But before he can do anything, Nato grabs his face and slams it into the ground. He tells Jin to use his brain for once. It would be pointless for him to die while trying to achieve his goal, so he might as well live for his goal. And if he doesn't come to understand that, he's definitely going to get himself killed any one of these days. A little while later, the entire situation has cooled down, so Nato is now on the phone with his assistant and asks for the school nurse to come out there as soon as possible. Homer isn't physically fit to continue the challenge. While Jin has also been fully restrained, that just leaves Shiki as the last one in the group. As he musters the strength to stand up, Nato tells him he still has 5 minutes and 42 seconds to complete the challenge. But here's the twist. Nato has already found one of the blue orbs, so Shiki is now left with two choices. Either find the last one in 5 minutes and reach the goal, or battle him and take the orb. Shiki doesn't even think about it, and just runs away as fast as he can, and although Nato is disappointed, he still chases after him. Meanwhile, Jin is just left there alone, but then he looks to the bushes and is surprised to see Shiki come out from them. Shiki stands in front of him and offers to help him, but only on the condition that he works with him. Shiki knows there's no way he's taking Nato down alone on his own. Jin hears that and immediately refuses, saying it would be extremely humiliating for him to be saved by him. Shiki squats down and talks some sense into Jin, telling him to put his pride aside and just focus on the goal they both are are trying to achieve. In an attempt to get through to Jin, Shiki mentions that his dad used to be a Momotaro as well. So if you think about it, they aren't all that different. Meanwhile, Nato is busy searching over the entire forest for Shiki, but he can't seem to find him. This makes him wonder whether he might have turned back. That's when he spots Shiki running below him through the forest way. He lands in front of him, causing Shiki to stop abruptly. And at this point, Shiki starts to sweat because he thinks he's cooked. But that's when Jin jumps down from a nearby tree and launches a sneak attack. Nato dodges it quickly, but is genuinely surprised that the two of them actually managed to team up. Still, he's confident he can handle them both. But then, Jin unexpectedly throws a rope, and together they use it to tie and tighten around Nato. Nato is honestly impressed by how well they coordinated. He even thinks their plan might have worked, if only they weren't so drained of stamina. Shiki feels that this is the perfect opportunity for him. He runs towards Nato and slaps the orb out of his hands, making it land on the ground. At this point, several thoughts are running through Nato's head. They have just under 3 minutes left to complete the game, so if they started sprinting now, one of them would be able to make it back. However, if Jin grabs the ball and makes a run for it, Shiki will likely chase after him and try to steal it, creating the perfect opening for Nato to swoop in and take it back. But to everyone's surprise, Shiki flashes a bright smile and encourages Jin, telling him to grab the ball and run for it. Without hesitation, Jin grabs the ball and sprints toward the finish line as fast as he can. As Jin runs away, Shiki taunts Nato, thinking he just won. But Nato bursts his bubble by telling him that if Jin scores with the ball like that, he would be the only one who would pass, and anyone else who fails would get expelled. Shiki can't believe how much of a dumbass he's been. He falls to his knees and can only start to regret. Seeing this, Nato can tell Shiki is the honest type of guy who acts on whatever's right in front of him without thinking about the cost or benefit. Meanwhile, Jin runs toward the finish line at top speed, having in mind that if he keeps running at this pace, he'll barely make it in time. But that's when he gets a couple of flashbacks about how Shiki helped and even supported him even when he clearly shouldn't have. This makes Jin have a sudden change of heart, so he turns and runs back towards them. However, he tells Shiki not to get the wrong idea. He's only doing this because he doesn't want to feel indebted to him ever. He'd rather get expelled and finish his goal by himself than feel indebted to him. Just as he's about to hand Shiki the orb, a small red magic being comes out of nowhere and stops. Jin and Shiki have no idea what the creature is, so they just stop and stare at it. Nato then explains that it's Muku, a high-speed tapir messenger from Baku Express. His main job is to deliver messages instantly without leaving any trace behind. Nato starts to feel uneasy. If Muku came all this way, it probably means there's an urgent situation. He plays the recorded message from Muku's back, and they all hear that the Kyoto branch of the Oni agency is under attack by the Momotaro agency. They're requesting immediate backup. Meanwhile, the other students wait outside the training field. It's been over an hour since the test began, and they start to wonder why no one has come out yet. A few seconds later, they finally see them emerging but quickly notice that Homer isn't with them, so they immediately ask where she is. Nato explains that she overused a lot of her blood and will be out of action for a few days. That aside, Nato informs them that the physical training test is cancelled. The Kyoto branch of the Oni agency sent them an emergency request for backup, and Nato says they all are going to be heading there immediately as the backup. About an hour later, they set sail on a fancy cruise ship headed for the agency headquarters. Shiki spends his time in front of a mirror, trying to make his Oni horns disappear. After several minutes of intense focus, he finally succeeds and gets really excited. He rushes to tell Akari, but he casually reminds Shiki that everyone else here can already do that, so it's not exactly a big deal. Nato is busy farming aura by doing one-finger push-ups, while telling his students that even though they're heading to the attacked location with him, they won't be fighting. They'll only be handling support tasks. The students groan in disappointment, saying they want to be on the front lines. Nato responds by saying the support work they'll be doing is actually pretty cool. He explains that each municipal has at least one Oni agency unit stationed in it. Those units have two major responsibilities. First is the battle unit, who fight on the front lines when the Momotaro strike. The second unit is the support unit, a team that aids the Oni who live among the humans. They protect Oni who have no family or support and help with their daily life issues. And since Oni can't visit regular doctors, they also provide physical and mental health care whenever they fight the Momotaro. The students are also responsible for rescue and medical support. That's why they're being assigned to the support unit. Shiki gets frustrated when he hears this. Fighting on the front lines would have been a chance for him to grow stronger. He even wonders if the guy who killed his dad might be there, and the only way to find out is by getting there first. Finally, Nato adds that the Momotaro agency has several regional branches, and the one stationed in Kyoto is especially formidable. Shortly after, Nato and his students arrive at their destination. Nato tells them that he plans on taking them to the underground area beneath the Uryuta temple, but everyone become confused when the group stops in front of what appears to be a regular restaurant. An old lady then lifts up the curtain at the entrance and says she's been expecting them. She then leads them into her living room, where she unveils the secret underground passageway that runs directly beneath the Uryuta temple. Elsewhere, we see Tsubakiri, the captain of the Momotaro agency, who has just slaughtered an entire unit of Oni with the help of his trusty vice captain, Yomogi. Yomogi is kind of annoyed because Tsubakiri went a little overboard when dealing with the Oni. Cleaning this mess up is going to be a real pain in the neck, but Tsubakiri defends himself, saying he simply can't resist conducting experiments on the Oni whenever he comes in and encounters them. He's a little upset that there were only male Oni this time around. He prefers using female Oni for his experiments because they have a higher pain tolerance. Yomogi feels that Tsubakiri's experiments have gotten a little out of hand, especially his latest creation, a hideous hybrid of a dog, a monkey, and pheasant. Tsubakiri admits the creature is really ugly, but insists that it's extremely important, because this time, he succeeded in creating an Oni eater that preys only other Oni, which is the ultimate anti-Oni biological weapon. Yomogi warns Tsubakiri not to lose sight of their objective, which is to protect the civilians and destroy dangerous Oni, but Tsubakiri is more concerned about discovering the mysteries behind Oni blood, things such as its healing factor, the way it mutates, and the weapons it allows them to make. Yomogi reminds Tsubakiri that he's only able to conduct these little experiments of his because he's a member of the agency, so he should at least try to contribute a little. Tsubakiri continues to ramble about all the wonders he would be able to perform if he was able to control Oni blood, but what he doesn't know is that there's a little Oni boy hiding in fear as he overhears all the terrible things they just said. The voices of the Momotaro agents slowly fade, so the boy takes a sigh of relief, thinking he's just escaped death, but Tsubakiri then sticks his head out in front of him. The boy moves back scared. Turns out Tsubakiri knew he was there all along. Tsubakiri feels it's his lucky day because he was actually running low on child specimens, but luckily for him, he's just found one. Yomogi walks over and hits him hard with the intent of knocking him out, but the boy is still conscious and mustering strength to get back up. While she's kicking him, a drop of blood splashes onto Tsubakiri's uniform, and Yomogi realizes this is bad. Tsubakiri then approaches the Oni boy and starts kicking him as well, explaining that although he's interested in studying Oni blood, he's disgusted by it. Finally, Tsubakiri shows his power off by manipulating the corpses of the fallen Oni and rolling them all together into a massive pile. He crushes the boy beneath them until he dies. Their abilities allow them to fight using black bacteria from their bodies. Some use this power to make weapons, while some use it to launch spores. But what Yomogi finds disturbing is the way Tsubakiri uses his power. Tsubakiri is able to use his black bacteria to control corpses without any limits. Tsubakiri then orders his ugly hybrid creation to eat the pile of Oni and clean up the remains. With that handled, Tsubakiri and Yomogi decide to get back to work. Simultaneously, Nato and his students are still passing through the underground Kyoto tunnel, and after a little more walking, Nato opens up a large tunnel door and announces that they just arrived at the Oni Agency Kyoto base. Shiki and the others are stunned. The place is so massive that they mistake it for a mansion. That's when a guy with pink hair walks out of one of the rooms. Seeing Nato, he calmly moves over to greet him, until he spots Kuina among the students. He instantly loses his composure as he sees a hot girl like her is one of Nato's students, so he turns back to fix his hair. He speaks to Kuina directly and boldly asks her for her number, but Kuina declines. The rejection hits him hard, but he doesn't lose hope. He knows he's going to get lucky one of these days. Shiki is curious about who this clown is, so he introduces himself as Kyoya, the commander of the support unit of the Oni Agency. Apparently, he and Nato used to be classmates back in Resetsu Academy. Nato puts an end to all the chit-chat and informs them that he's about to head to the front lines. His students hear that and are all eager to come along with him, but Nato doesn't give a response to them. He just tells Kyoya that he's free to use his students as he likes until he gets back from the front lines. Just then, one of the nurses comes in to call Kyoya because there's a really serious emergency on the ground. The nurse sees that the students from the academy have arrived, so she tells them to hurry up and change because they're going to need their help for this operation. Shortly after, everyone gets changed and are escorted to the patient center. Shiki looks around and shudders as he sees the dire conditions these frontline soldiers are in. However, the nurse draws Kyoya's attention to a frontline soldier who's in even worse condition. During battle, the soldier lost both his arms and legs. He's even struggling to breathe because his lungs sustained some intense damage. The nurse estimates that he has about 3 minutes left. Shiki trembles in fear fear as he watches the patient because he never knew life on the front lines could get so scary. But despite the man's dire medical condition, Kyoya still has a bright smile on his face while he tells the patient that he's going to be just fine. Shiki tells Kyoya to stop fooling around because he doesn't think that man has any chance of surviving, given his current medical state. But Kyoya just tells Shiki to trust him when he says that. Kyoya orders the nurses to get him several Oni blood bags. While doing so, he tells everyone that he's going to give them a little sneak peek of what life on the front lines is like. Elsewhere, Tsubakiri and his team have just taken down the first wave of the Oni agents. The remaining members of the Oni agency are starting to consider running away because they saw that Tsubakiri is so strong that he was able to kill both their commander and vice commander. Tsubakiri slowly walks towards them with the intention of finishing them off. But Nato arrives at the last second and uses his blood eclipse release to summon blood archers who shoot arrows at him simultaneously. Tsubakiri manages to block by using the corpses of the Oni as shields. With that out of the way, Tsubakiri informs Nato that he heard there's a place where the Kyoto Oni have been quietly gathering. He asks whether that means the Oni species would vanish if they wipe them all out. But Nato has no idea what he's talking about, so Tsubakiri just assumes it was just a rumor after all. Back at the agency, several Oni blood bags have been hooked up to Kyoya's body. He looks down at the patient and asks him whether he would want to regain his arms or legs. Considering his lung issue, he can't really talk, so Kyoya just tells him to use his mouth movements to indicate his answer. The patient indicates that he would prefer to grow his arms back first because he still wants to be able to hug his kids if he survives. Kyoya assures him that he's going to get back to his kids after this. Kyoya takes out a scalpel and uses it to pierce his skin, allowing a thick streak of his Oni blood to pour into the patient's mouth. The patient starts to scream in pain, so the nurses urge the students to finally make themselves useful by restraining the patient while he screams. A few seconds later, the blood packs are almost immediately emptied, so the nurse urges the less busy students to go into the next door room and get some more blood. Shiki continues to restrain the patient until he looks at the guy's arm and sees that it's slowly starting to regenerate. He scurries back in shock. The cell regeneration process has already begun, so his arms sprout back out and his lungs slowly start to repair themselves. The students observe this and are shocked to see that the man's arms and lungs have been healed. Shiki asks Kyoya whether the patient's legs will regenerate too. Kyoya replies, saying they will regenerate with time and the right medical doses. Kyoya further explains that if they try to regenerate both his arms and legs at once, the patient likely will develop some antibodies, and once that happens, no amount of blood transfusion would be able to solve it. The patient is most likely going to be retired from the battle unit after this, but Kyoya tells him that he can still join the support team if he still wants to be of some help to the agency. The patient hears this and can't do anything but shed tears of joy while he thanks Kyoya for all he's done for him. Kyoya then draws the attention of the students that in this ongoing war, this patient he just saved could very well have been any one of them right now. He understands why they're so eager to fight on the front lines. However, he reminds them that those who fight all the dangerous monsters on the front lines always survive because they have someone behind them keeping them safe. That's the exact job of the support unit. The students now understand how cool and important the support role is, so they even offer to help them in any possible way they can. Kyoya has the perfect job for Shiki. He asks him to look after the little girl named Mei over there. Mei was brought in yesterday because she was attacked by a Momotaro and her parents haven't been found yet. Kyoya is counting on Shiki to keep her company until further notice. Shiki goes to sit down beside Mei. He tries to initiate conversation by making small talk, but she completely ignores him. She finally speaks when Shiki asks her whether she wants to go to Uryuda. She replies, saying she doesn't know where that is. Shiki is shocked to hear she doesn't know where that place is because it's so popular that it's taught in elementary school. But Shiki gets a clear explanation as Mei tells him that she's never been to a school. After that, they both walk through the hallway to see an entire new wave of Oni agents have just been killed by the Momotaro, so their corpses are currently being rushed in to be properly disposed of. Mei looks at some of the corpses as they go by, and two of them that pass turn out to be her mom and dad. Mei discovers that they died during battle and can't do anything but cry in mourning. Back on the front lines, Tsubakiri has a loud smirk while he explains to Nato that he left some Oni corpses behind that were laced with his bacteria. He made sure they were easy to find and assumed that they would bring those corpses back to base. In other words, they just ended up bringing in corpses into their base that Tsubakiri can control whenever he wants. Nato widens his eyes in shock at this realization. Tsubakiri isn't sure whether the corpses have arrived at their base yet, so he decides to conduct a little test by moving his fingers to revive them. Back at the agency, Tsubakiri starts off by controlling Mei's dad's body by making him sit up. Mei sees this and is really excited, thinking that her dad didn't die after all. In the next few moments, Shiki and Kyoya look back to see that Mei's dad has woken up and is choking his own daughter to death. Kyoya sees this and instantly knows that this is Tsubakiri's doing. He first of all instructs Shiki to cover Mei's eyes, after which he uses 2 scalpels to stab him through the head, thereby destroying his brain. The corpse then collapses to the ground. When dealing with cases like this, just cutting the head off won't be enough. You would need to destroy the brain. Mei rushes over to her dad's corpse and continues to cry. Kyoya is busy feeling sorry for Mei, but that's when he realizes that they have over 30 corpses in the building that Tsubakiri has control over. At that moment, Mei's mom grabs Shiki from behind, choking him. Kyoya notices and rushes to help, but before he can, 3 other Oni zombies grab him from behind, holding him back. Meanwhile, the nurses are busy carrying corpses to the disposal unit when the bodies suddenly wake up and start attacking. Right after, a massive wave of Oni zombies bursts through the door into the patient room. They immediately attack the patients lying on the floor, but the nurses fight back as best they can. Back in the other room, Mei cries her heart out, begging her mom to stop choking Shiki, but her mom has already turned into a zombie, and Shiki knows she's beyond saving. Kyoya desperately wants to help, but the 3 Oni zombies blocking him refuse to back down. Before Shiki passes out, he slowly reaches for a neat-looking handgun. He remembers being on the boat coming here when Nato had given it to him for self-defense, since Shiki still couldn't fully control his blood. Back then, Shiki wasn't thinking about self-defense, he was just thrilled to finally have a real gun instead of a fake model. Nato had explained the gun was loaded with Shiki's blood-infused rounds, meaning they hit much harder than normal bullets. Since there weren't many bullets, Nato told him to only use them when it truly counted. Shiki realizes that using the gun on Mei's mom is his only chance to survive. He hugs Mei to block her view, then shoots her mom in the head. Shiki takes a sharp breath, feeling a wave of relief. Meanwhile, Kyoya is still pinned under the Oni zombies, but Shiki saves him by shooting all 3 in the head, killing them instantly. Kyoya pushes the pile of corpses off himself and looks over at Shiki. They help each other to their feet, and Kyoya tells him he'll handle getting the patients to safety, while Shiki takes charge of dealing with the Oni zombies in the main hall. Meanwhile, the patients are seconds away from becoming zombie food until Akari bursts in, saving them at the last moment by hitting the zombies with a hard punches to the face. The other students join the fight, defending themselves, but after a while they realize something strange. No matter how many times they hit the zombies, the creatures just won't stay down. Jin looks worried, clearly wondering what they should do next. That's when Shiki suddenly yells out, telling everyone that the only way to defeat the zombies is with headshots. Any strike to another part of the body won't kill them. Hearing this, Jin quickly uses his eclipse technique, throwing 3 blood shurikens aimed directly at the zombies' heads. Just as Shiki said, they drop instantly, dead for good. The others see this, and now they're convinced this is how they need to fight. With that settled, Kyoya orders the support unit to focus on evacuating the patients and preventing any more casualties. Shiki keeps firing his handgun, taking down multiple zombies at once, though the act disgusts him. Killing so many corpses feels wrong. Some students announce they'll go help with the evacuation, but Akari snaps back, telling them there's no need to say it, just go and do it. They take the hint and leave, while Akari stays behind, holding his ground against the undead. Meanwhile, Shiki starts feeling more and more uneasy. Every zombie he shoots was once someone important to somebody. These were innocent people, yet here he is pumping bullets into them when their real enemy is supposed to be the Momotaro. The thought of that just makes his blood boil. Kyoya orders the remaining nurses to get all the patients to safety while Shiki and the others keep holding the zombies back. Meanwhile, Tsubakiri and Nato are about to face off. Nato charges first, but Tsubakiri blocks by shoving 3 Oni zombies in front of him as a shield. Nato stays calm until Tsubakiri's pet suddenly bursts out of nowhere, lunging at him. Nato narrowly dodges at the last second, and in the process, the 3 Oni zombies are struck, their blood splattering across the wall. Nato looks at them with a cold, unflinching stare. Tsubakiri smirks and tells him he should be happy after all. The Oni zombies are being killed off. After that, Nato tells the others to head back to the evacuation point while he takes care of Tsubakiri. But Tsubakiri has no intention of letting anyone leave. He calls out for Yomogi, and she steps forward. Using her black bacteria, she creates a cage that traps Nato and the others inside. Nato asks what they're trying to accomplish by doing this, so Tsubakiri explains that as long as he has them trapped, they can stay in their hideout for as long as they want. He adds that the barrier is so strong that they can't escape unless Yomogi allows it. Tsubakiri assumes Nato believes he doesn't know where their hideout is, so he reveals that he planted transmitters on every corpse he left behind mind. By tracking the signals from those transmitters, he discovered their hideout is beneath Dera. Nato's calm expression fades as he realizes Tsubakiri has just learned their location. Tsubakiri then starts walking away, giving Yomogi a signal. Yomogi responds by letting the ugly pass through the barrier. Nato and the others stay on guard, not sure what's about to happen. As Tsubakiri keeps walking, he snaps his fingers, causing the ugly creature to swell. The Oni agents look on in disgust, while Nato watches with curiosity, wondering what will happen next. The creature begins to glow, and it's clear it's about to explode, so Nato shouts for everyone to get down. The blast is so powerful, it destroys everything within a 100-meter radius. Tsubakiri watches the explosion, disappointed that it wasn't more violent. He says he'll work on improving it in the future. Yomogi suggests checking for survivors, but Tsubakiri says there's no need, no one could survive that. Besides, he just washed his uniform and doesn't want blood on it. Moments later, Nato is seen lying on the ground, his body covered in scars and burns. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, Shiki shoots the last Oni zombie in the head and breathes a sigh of relief, glad it's finally over. Kyoya announces that they've successfully moved the patients to the main hall, and it's all thanks to everyone being here, so he thanks them deeply. Meanwhile, Mei stands frozen, as her mom and dad lie lifeless on the floor with bullet holes in their heads. Kyoya notices this and feels sorry for her. He walks over and tells her he's sorry she had to go through that. Shiki also apologizes, admitting he was the one who shot her mother in the head. He recalls the moment and feels lingering guilt, but to his surprise, Mei says it's fine. She explains that she's always lived in hiding and never had a normal childhood, never doing things like going to school. Because of that, she isn't shocked. She always thought this day would come. She just didn't know when. She even smiles at Shiki, telling him not to worry. Hearing this makes Shiki shudder in disbelief. Mei just saw her parents killed, and all she can say is that it's okay. This makes Shiki clench his fists in frustration as he recalls his own childhood. Back then, he admired superheroes. The Momotaro are supposed to be the superheroes of their world, so why do they take the lives of innocent people just because they have Oni blood? Overwhelmed with emotion, he hugs Mei and says that because of this, he'll become the villain so he can destroy the so-called heroes. He keeps hugging her, telling Mei not to worry because he'll create a world where they can all smile again. Everyone else silently watches this. Still in Shiki's arms, Mei's eyes tremble with emotion. Later, Jin and Kyoya return from the agency through the underground tunnel. Kyoya suggests they gather the bodies of their fallen friends, saying he'll lead Jin to the cremation site and start transporting them there. Back at the agency, the others are left with the task of disposing of the corpses, and Akari isn't happy about it, complaining that Kyoya left them to do all the grunt work. He turns around and sees Juji just standing there, so he yells at him to quit slacking off. Juji quickly replies that he's not slacking, since this place was just attacked. It's obvious the area isn't safe, so he thinks it's best to stay on guard at all times. His ability is designed for scouting, so he bites his thumb to draw blood, lets it drip onto the floor, and a huge blood radar appears beneath them. This is his blood eclipse release technique. Ikari has never seen anything like it, so he shudders in shock. Juji explains that his blood can detect any living being within a 5-kilometer radius of where it lands, and it can even tell if they're a Momotaro or not. The radar starts scanning the surroundings, but at first, it detects nothing. However, Juji points out that the heat signature's sensitivity is low, which makes it harder for him to pinpoint a target's exact appearance or power level. Just then, the radar beeps, something has been found, and Juji's eyes widen in shock at the reading. Meanwhile, in the Mizumoto region, Tsubakiri and Yomogi have already found the secret tunnel's location and have even taken out the kind old lady guarding it. Tsubakiri is on the phone with his assistant, ordering him to send several ugly units to the coordinates he's providing. He also asks for the special ugly he's been saving for an important occasion. Before ending the call, he requests the file on the high-risk Oni, just for reference. Hanging up, Tsubakiri tells Yomogi that if Nato has already appeared, then something big is definitely happening. Yomogi draws his attention to the massive tunnel in front of them. She doesn't know who or what could be inside, so she suggests throwing in some poison gas. Tsubakiri pauses to think, agrees it's a good idea, but then suddenly changes his mind. He decides to enter the tunnel himself. He also tells Yomogi that before killing any Oni they find, they should first ask for their names. Yomogi asks why, and Tsubakiri explains that if they run into someone named Shiki, he wants him captured alive, not dead. She asks what's so special about him, and Tsubakiri replies that Shiki is very different from the rest. For that reason, he wants to take Shiki back to the lab for study. With that decided, the two of them head into the tunnel, determined to wipe out the Oni race once and for all. In flashback, where Mei is shown enjoying the happiest moments of her life with her parents, smiling and laughing together. But the warmth suddenly fades when she sees a nurse carrying her mother's lifeless body out of the room. Mei breaks down crying as she realizes that her life would never remain the same from this point onwards. Meanwhile, Jin and Kyoya are seen walking out of the agency crematorium. Jin feels unsettled that the agency even has such a place, so he asks Kyoya about it. Kyoya explains that whenever wars like this break out, many people end up here because not everyone can be saved. He tells Jin not to be soft, because this is the kind of world he's now a part of, and he'll have to get used to it. Still, Kyoya reassures him not to worry, promising that as long as he's around, he won't let Jin die so easily. With no more questions left on Jin's mind, Kyoya decides to ask one of his own. Out of nowhere, he casually asks Jin if he has a girlfriend and what kind of girls he likes, but Jin ignores him completely. They continue walking until Kyoya suddenly senses a dark presence behind him, but before he can react, he's stabbed in the stomach by Tsubakiri with a simple butter knife. Pulling the blade out, Tsubakiri remarks that Kyoya is lucky. If he hadn't moved at the last second, the knife would have pierced his heart. Furious, Jin activates his blood eclipse release technique and charges at Tsubakiri, but Yomogi sneaks up behind him and traps his hands using her black bacteria, forming a small box around them. The box slowly dissolves, leaving damage behind, though Jin knows he'll heal quickly thanks to the regenerative power of Oni blood. The intense pain dulls his focus and slows his thinking. Strategically, Jin realizes this is the worst possible situation for them. Despite being stabbed, Kyoya orders Jin to return to the agency and warn Shiki and the others that Tsubakiri is here, so they can evacuate the patients and everyone else. Jin hesitates, worried about how Kyoya will handle both Tsubakiri and Yomogi while injured, but Kyoya brushes off his concern, saying he'll handle it somehow. Reluctantly, Jin runs off, promising he'll be back with help. As soon as he leaves, Tsubakiri signals Yomogi, who places her hand on the ground. Immediately, a massive wall of bacteria rises up, sealing off the area and trapping Kyoya inside with them. Kyoya observes their tactic and quickly realizes their plan is to ensure no one gets out alive. Yomogi confirms this, telling him she's sealed the entire underground section of Urudadera, meaning escape is impossible. Even hearing that, Kyoya doesn't waver. He keeps up his confident persona, but inside, he begins piecing together the grim reality. There are no escape routes underground. The only fighters left are students, and reinforcements from the surface are hopeless. Worse yet, Tsubakiri and Yomogi are both extremely powerful. After considering all of this, Kyoya sighs and looks upward, admitting to himself that he'll most likely die in this battle. At that moment, Tsubakiri finally speaks, asking Kyoya if he knows who Shiki really is. At that moment, Kyoya realizes he needs to stand his ground somehow. He quickly reaches into his lab coat and pulls out a syringe filled with a dangerous chemical known as wolfsbane. It's a poisonous plant that causes respiratory failure and organ collapse. His plan is to inject Tsubakiri with it before things get any worse. But before Kyoya can even move, Tsubakiri dashes past him in a blur and slits his throat. Blood splatters everywhere as Kyoya collapses to the ground. As he slowly begins to die, Kyoya mutters regretfully that if he was ever going to get killed, he always wished it would have been by a hot girl. Believing Kyoya to be dead, Tsubakiri walks over, ready to harvest his corpse with his black bacteria. But then he changes his mind. He senses his other pets have just arrived. He signals Yomogi to let them in. The pets walk through the barrier, and Tsubakiri orders the one in front to hand over what he asked for. The monster opens its mouth and spits out a large coffin it had been storing in its stomach. Meanwhile, Jin finally makes it back to headquarters, only to be shocked at what he sees. The whole place looks deserted and soaked in blood. He walks into a nearby room and finds Shiki and a few other staff members hiding inside. Jin immediately asks why there are so few of them. Shiki explains they received intel that the Momotaro were coming, so they quickly evacuated all the patients to the surface. But when it was their turn to escape, all the exits were sealed by Yomogi's black bacteria. Luckily, the patients managed to get out safely, but those left behind, including Mei, weren't able to make it. Ikari suggests splitting up to search for another way out, but one of the nurses speaks up. She explains there's no point because she already checked every exit. There's absolutely no way out. Just then, one of Tsubakiri's ugly pets casually walks into the room. Shiki and the others freeze, not knowing what to do. The pet ignores them, walks forward, grabs one of the nurses, and begins eating him alive. The other nurses scream in terror and immediately run off in fear. Moments later, Tsubakiri and Yomogi arrive at the Oni agency. Tsubakiri looks around in surprise, commenting on how impressive it is that they built all of this underground. The pet places the coffin in the center of the room, and Tsubakiri gives Yomogi his next order: kill everyone except Shiki, since he wants to keep him alive. Yomogi asks if he'll be joining, but Tsubakiri shakes his head, sits casually on top of the coffin, and says he won't. He has some thinking to do. With that, Yomogi heads out with the monster monsters to finish off any Oni still inside the building. Meanwhile, in the break room, Kuina rummages through a closet, looking for clothes. The nurse outfit she's been stuck wearing is too tight and hard to move in. Behind her, Rokuro is lying dramatically on the floor, whining that he's going to die from all the anxiety this situation is giving him. His constant complaining gets on Kuina's nerves, and she snaps at him to shut up. In the next moment, Kuina finishes changing into a much freer outfit. She stretches her arms and feels ready, now confident she can hold her own against the Momotaro. Just then, Kuina notices one of the monsters approaching, so she tells Rokuro to get ready and prepare for battle. But instead of standing firm, Rokuro panics, saying he can't fight while he's this anxious. Hearing this, Kuina gets a crazed smirk on her face as she realizes Rokuro is completely helpless and fully relying on her. She tells him to hide in the closet until the fight is over. Rokuro is surprised she gave him such an easy option, but the moment he hears it, he doesn't hesitate and rushes into the closet to hide. That's when the monster bursts through the door. The first thing it does is ask Kuina if she's Shiki. Rokuro overhears this from inside the closet and is shocked that these monsters are actually capable of speaking. Kuina quickly tells the monster she's not Shiki. So, following Tsubakiri's orders, the monster attacks Kuina with the intent to kill her. The monster throws punch after punch, but Kuina dodges every single one with ease. The force behind each strike is so strong that it knocks over the closet Rokuro is hiding in, and he faints in shock. Kuina steps forward, telling the monster not to feel so proud just for smashing a couple of walls. She bites her thumb and unleashes her blood eclipse release technique, which she calls I Love. Meanwhile, Jin is running as fast as he can, trying to get back to Kyoya in time to help him. At the same time, Mei and Shiki search for somewhere to hide, eventually slipping into the garden and crouching in the bushes. Shiki watches through the leaves, staying alert in case any of the Momotaro spot them. Back inside, Rokuro wakes up in the closet and instantly panics, convinced his heart has stopped beating. But then he notices the room is silent, so he tries to calm himself, saying everything he saw earlier must have just been a dream he had while asleep in the closet. But as he slowly opens the closet door, he sees the monster standing right there, staring at him. Strangely, it doesn't attack. Instead, it walks over to Kuina and acts as though it's now her pet. Rokuro can't believe what he's seeing, but in the very next moment, Kuina clenches her blood-plated gloves and punches the monster across the face. The monster crashes to the floor, and Kuina keeps striking it again and again until it finally dies. She was able to finish it thanks to her blood eclipse release. If Kuina's blood coats an enemy past a certain limit, they fall under her spell and gradually lose the will to fight. Rokuro watches in awe, shocked that she managed to take down the monster all on her own. People who know Kuina describe her as dependable and sisterly, which fits since she's tough, trustworthy, and admired by many. But her closest friends say she spoils others to an almost pathological degree. Rokuro bows and thanks Kuina sincerely for saving his life. Hearing this makes her blush, and in the next moment, she lays down a futon, tucks Rokuro in, and tells him to just sleep. By the time he wakes up, she promises everything will already be taken care of. Down the hall, a nurse is running for her life as the monster chases her, but let's just say she wasn't fast enough to escape. Back in the room, Kuina notices that Rokuro looks really pale, so she stands up and says she's going to prepare a meal for him. As she leaves the room, Rokuro is still trying to process everything that's happening. He starts thinking this might be a trap, where Kuina plans to use him as bait, letting the monster eat him while she runs away during the distraction. Kuina then notices that Rokuro is trembling, so she comes back to check on him. That's when another monster suddenly walks in. Kuina immediately stands up, stares it straight in the eyes, and gets ready to give it a serious beating. The ugly lunges at Kuina with its freaky tentacle arm, but she narrowly dodges at the last second. She immediately shouts for Rokuro to stay hidden, and he nervously yells back that he already is. Right away, Kuina notices that this monster's attacks are far stronger than the others, which makes her realize this one has to be either completely different from them or part of its own special species. Annoyed, she leaps into the air and drives her blood-plated fist forward with a crushing punch, but the ugly slips aside with ease, then drives its tentacle straight into her skin. Rokuro, watching from his hiding spot, feels his stomach drop in terror. Kuina fights with all her strength, but it's clear she's getting overpowered. The ugly wraps its tentacles tightly around both of her arms, then slams her into the ceiling. Her body is tossed around like a rag doll as the monster hurls her against the walls. Finally, it smashes her into the floor and begins stomping on her face over and over again. Rokuro, still frozen in hiding, realizes that Kuina is in serious serious danger. She has already been beaten half to death, and at this rate, she won't last long. He knows he should do something, but he can't stop thinking about how useless he is. If Kuina couldn't win, what chance does he have? If he steps out now, he'll only get himself killed. So his plan is to keep hiding and pray that someone stronger shows up to save her. But even as he watches Kuina's face being crushed under the ugly's heel, he still doesn't move. Instead, he stares down at his hands, wondering how he became such a pathetic coward. He wasn't always like this. The sight stirs memories of a time when he still felt alive, back when Lulu was part of his world. Lulu, his first crush, was a year older, and whenever Rokuro was with her, he felt unstoppable. She gave him the courage to do things he'd never dare on his own, like leaping off a cliff into the lake without a second thought. She was always there, watching him with warmth in her eyes. Rokuro had been born in a quiet, remote town where Oni lived secretly among themselves, and Lulu happened to be one of them. Out of everything they did together, what he loved most was dancing with her. Even now, he can still picture the glowing sunset as the two of them practiced their steps side by side. Then came the night of the town festival. Rokuro and Lulu danced happily under the lanterns, having the time of their lives, until suddenly Lulu stumbled. Rokuro caught her and asked if she was feeling alright. She brushed it off, claiming she was fine, but that was a lie. In truth, she was very sick. For Oni, the moment their horns begin to grow, their blood changes completely. That meant she could no longer be treated at a human hospital. The only option was the Oni doctor in town, who started treating her right away. At first, it seemed like she was on the road to recovery, and both of them believed she'd be healthy again soon. But then disaster struck. The Momotaro agency raided their village. In the chaos, the Oni doctor was killed, leaving Lulu with no one who could help her. Her illness worsened quickly. Despite her weakening body and fading hope, Rokuro never left her side. He tried everything to cheer her up, always smiling for her sake, even when despair started weighing on them both. But his cheerful spirit wasn't enough. One day, as Rokuro held her hand tightly, it slipped out from his grasp. He looked down and realized she was gone. Lulu was dead. His safe harbor, his reason to feel strong, had vanished. Rokuro stayed there for hours, sobbing over her body. Not long after her death, the fears and anxieties he had once buried deep came flooding back. His hair began turning white, sleepless nights consumed him, and before he knew it, he had become a broken, nervous wreck, a full-blown neurotic, hollowed out by grief. From that day on, Rokuro was never the same. That's why he feels like he can't face this ugly, because without Lulu, he believes he's nothing. But just as Kuina is about to be finished off by the monster's crushing tentacles, Rokuro suddenly rushes in and saves her. Holding Kuina in his arms, he admits that if Lulu could see him now, she'd be disappointed. Ever since she died, he hasn't been the cool, fearless person she once knew him to be. That's why he decides he has to change. He has to grow strong enough so that one day he can look Lulu in the eye and say he stayed the same guy she always believed in, even after she was gone. To do that, he believes he needs to gather more achievements than he's ever had before, even if they come from someone as unreliable as him. At first, Rokuro hesitates, but after a moment, he steadies his breathing, bites his finger, and activates his blood eclipse release. His blood pours out and forms a life-sized model of Lulu. Rokuro has always believed he was only strong when Lulu was by his side, so as this blood-formed image of her embraces him, he draws in that strength. Power and confidence surge through him. His ultimate release manifests as a long, flowing coat made of blood and a hand fan to wield in battle. He names this new ability Frigid Ashes Dance. Rokuro charges straight at the ugly. With a single sweeping strike of his blood-forged fan, he lands a devastating blow, cutting deeper than he ever imagined he could. His blood cloak then whirls around him, scattering into a storm of razor-sharp petals. Each spin of his body creates slicing winds that tear through the air at his command. Standing tall, Rokuro smirks back at the monster and asks if it enjoyed his first attack. The ugly retaliates with a flurry of tentacle strikes, but Rokuro's body feels light now. He dodges easily, weaving between the attacks like a dancer. In that moment, memories of Lulu rush through his mind. He realizes the truth. He was never truly invincible. He only pretended to be. But Lulu, she must have known that all along. Even so, she believed in him, and that was what made him strong. With that thought burning inside him, Rokuro bursts into motion, dancing around the ugly with blinding speed. The monster can't keep up, forced to stand its ground while Rokuro spins around it. Then, with a final flurry of razor-fast strikes, he unleashes his secret technique. Blades of blood and slicing winds shred through the ugly, cutting it down until it collapses in defeat. Breathing hard but standing tall, Rokuro glances upward with a confident grin and asks the ghost of Lulu if he looked cool while fighting. Meanwhile, Shiki and Mei are still hiding nearby. The battlefield grows quiet, and Shiki, hearing no more sounds of fighting, assumes the uglies have been taken care of. He turns to Mei and tells her that the monsters are gone. But Mei doesn't look relieved, still trembling. She admits that because her mom and dad died this way, she feels like she should die the same. Shiki gets serious. He tells her that if she dies, then it means she, her mom, and her dad all lost. But if she keeps living, if she keeps smiling toward the future, then none of them truly lost. Placing his hands firmly on her shoulders, he tells her what she needs to do right now is live. Fight her fears and cheer for him because he's going to fight too, and he's going to crush the monsters that stole her family. Shiki then gets up, telling Mei to stay hidden while he goes to check the situation outside. He warns her not to leave this spot under any circumstances, because if there are still enemies around, it's the safest place she can be, and if danger comes while he's gone, she should do the same thing they did before, hide. He turns and starts walking away, but after just a few steps, Mei calls out to him. She begs him not to go, saying that he's definitely going to lose, and she's terrified that he'll die. Shiki doesn't even turn back. All he says is that there's no way he's going to lose. His heart tells him that much, and for him, that's enough. He glances over his shoulder with a serious expression and declares that he won't give in to despair. Mei is stunned by his response. She can't understand how he can still be so brave after seeing what happened to the others who dared to stand against the monsters. Meanwhile, on the front lines, Nato and the others are surprisingly still alive. Nato wakes up after being unconscious, and one of the agents explains that he had been out for 15 minutes because he shielded them from the explosion at the last second. Hearing this, Nato immediately gets to his feet. He tells everyone to forget about what just happened and orders them all to head to the Uryudadera temple, because his students are still there. Back at the temple, Shiki steps into the main room and finds Tsubakiri calmly sitting at the center. One glance at the uniform is all Shiki needs to recognize him as a Momotaro. With a cold expression, Shiki asks if he's Tsubakiri, the one responsible for everything. Tsubakiri doesn't answer directly. Instead, he asks Shiki for his name. When Shiki gives it, Tsubakiri's eyes light up. He admits that Shiki is the very person he's been searching for, then finally confirms that he is indeed Tsubakiri. Hearing that, Shiki demands to know how he could do something as vile as desecrating corpses and then sit here so shamelessly, as if nothing were wrong. Tsubakiri only bursts out laughing. He explains that the corpses he desecrated weren't human, they were Oni. He mocks Shiki, saying that the lines he just used only apply to Momotaro, since they are humans with rights. Oni don't have rights at all. They deserve to be slaughtered. Rage surges through Shiki at those words. A vein bulges on his forehead as he draws his gun, aiming it straight at Tsubakiri's head. Meanwhile, Jin is sprinting at full speed to provide backup. But suddenly, a voice calls out to him from behind. It's Yomogi. She warns him not to waste his time searching for Kyoya and the others because, according to her, Tsubakiri already killed them. But Jin isn't shaken. He says he doesn't care. He only cares about his own goal. The two square off, preparing to fight. Jin activates his blood eclipse release, chainsaw revving as he charges forward. He swings for Yomogi with full force, but something feels wrong. As the smoke clears, he realizes his attack didn't work. Yomogi steps out unharmed from her black bacteria box, calmly remarking that it'll take far more than a single attack to stop her. Back at the agency, Shiki raises his gun to fire, but before he can shoot, Tsubakiri swats the weapon clean out of his hand. Tsubakiri tells Shiki he must be joking if he thought he could face him with an ordinary gun. Then he adds that Shiki's blood isn't as weak as the others. If used properly, he could actually be very valuable. Shiki growls in confusion, saying he doesn't even care what Tsubakiri means by that. The only thing that matters right now is how much he hates him. As he speaks, he unleashes his blood eclipse release, a giant gun made of his own blood, fused to his arm. Tsubakiri's eyes widen in excitement. He hasn't seen anything like this before. Shiki doesn't hesitate. He takes aim and fires. The blast is so powerful it obliterates the entire room, reducing it to rubble and flames. But when the smoke clears, Tsubakiri is still alive. He managed to dodge the attack at the very last moment. Shiki fixes him with a confident glare. He tells Tsubakiri that there's no way he'll be able to dodge the next shot. Tsubakiri tells Shiki that his determination has impressed him, enough to make him want to fight more seriously. He then opens the coffin behind him, and from it emerges a man dressed in a Momotaro outfit, driven by a violent urge to kill every other Oni in sight. Shiki calls Tsubakiri a monster for using his own comrades as experiments, but Tsubakiri only laughs, calling him an idiot. He tells Shiki that only idiots believe their way of thinking is the absolute right one. He explains that this puppet was once a person who willingly chose to become a test subject, all for the chance to gain a power no normal human could even imagine. Now, he has exactly what he wished for. The puppet immediately unleashes his ability, sending out shockwaves that pierce Shiki's body. Instantly, Shiki feels his entire body become unbearably heavy, forcing him down to the ground where he struggles to even lift himself. Tsubakiri Subakiri explains that this is his puppet's ability. He manipulates the bacteria in the oxygen around them and alters its weight. Shiki is now in serious trouble, with the Momotaro puppet focused entirely on destroying him. Shiki is crushed against the ground, unable to move. He never saw this coming. As he tries to understand what he's up against, Shiki realizes that the puppet's desperate craving to kill Oni must come from the final feelings he had before being transformed. Whether it was a grudge or an obsession, Shiki is certain the Momotaro spirit is still inside him. Subakiri agrees, saying that with such a powerful drive to destroy Oni, this puppet will make the perfect right-hand man, fighting without regrets until the day he dies. Meanwhile, Shiki's body is being forced down so strongly that the ground beneath him begins to cave in. Below, Nato and the other Oni agents are trying to return to headquarters to provide backup, but their path is blocked by the black bacterial barrier that Yomogi created. Some agents suggest using another entrance, but Nato points out that the others must already be sealed off as well. He's powerful enough to break through, but doing so would cause huge damage to Uryuta-dera above them, which is packed with tourists. Destroying the barrier would put civilians at serious risk. The agents realize Nato is saying the only way forward would be to evacuate every last tourist first, but they admit it's impossible. Unlike the Momotaro agency, they have no authority in the human world. At that moment, Juji rushes in and explains that during his earlier scan, he picked up an Oni reading. But right after that, the Momotaro barged inside. He reports that all the injured personnel, the support unit, and even Shiki and Jin are still trapped within the barrier. Hearing this, Nato knows time is running out. Shiki and the others are already in danger. Still, before destroying the wall, he insists their top priority must be to evacuate all the tourists on the surface and ensure their safety. Just then, another agent drags in Homer, who had been found outside. Nato is surprised to see her show up. Nervously, Homer admits that the others asked her to come and help, so she decided to. At this point, it's revealed that Juji has always had a crush on Homer, though he never had the courage to say anything. The moment he sees her, he nervously introduces himself and plainly asks Homer to take his virginity. Hearing this, Homer is left shocked and speechless. Nato scolds Juji, telling him to quit fooling around, but Juji insists he's being serious, claiming it's just the pure hopes of an honest, hardworking student. Watching Juji in such a pathetic state, Nato mutters that maybe his eye for talent isn't as sharp as he thought, since he once assumed Juji was just a normal, reliable kid. Putting that aside, Nato tells Homer that her showing up now doesn't really help them much, but after a moment of thought, he says he has an idea, a way to evacuate every single tourist in Uryuta-dera without leaving anyone behind. Soon after, Nato and Homer head up to the surface, into the forest behind Uryuta-dera. Using a cell phone, Nato explains his plan to Juji. He intends to force the tourists to evacuate by triggering a landslide. He and Homer are already at the backside of the mountain, where the landslide would begin. Juji calls the idea reckless, but Nato assures him no one will actually get caught in it. They'll stop it before it causes damage. The purpose is only to create panic so that the tourists will evacuate immediately, without hesitation. Once the landslide begins, the Oni agents will step in to guide the tourists to safety, while Nato and Homer sweep the area afterward to confirm no one is left behind. For the landslide itself, Nato tells Homer to summon the Titan she brought out before, since that's what they'll use. Homer shudders at the thought, but Nato tries to reassure her, saying he'll be there if anything goes wrong. Still, Homer admits she's scared of losing control, because she doesn't know how to handle her Oni blood yet. Hearing this, Nato doesn't argue. Instead, he coldly tells Juji over the phone that the plan is cancelled. They'll need to think of another solution quickly, because the longer they delay, the more danger the tourists are in. As for Homer, he glares at her and says she's expelled. He refuses to keep a student who can't be useful when the situation demands it. Nato starts to walk away, but Homer nervously calls him back. With fear written all over her face, she admits that she doesn't want to summon a Titan she can't control. Nato turns to her and says that fear itself isn't the problem. Refusing to change is. He reminds her that everyone who entered the academy came with their own burdens, so she's not the only one struggling. Then he asks why she came to his academy in the first place. Homer answers honestly, she wanted to learn how to control her blood. Nato tells her that only she can do that. She's the one who has to change. Those words spark something in Homer. With a rush of adrenaline, she bites her thumb and summons the Titan. Just as she feared, she loses control, and the Titan lashes out at Nato. Panicked, Homer apologizes repeatedly, but this is exactly what Nato wanted. The force of the battle triggers a massive landslide. Down in the town, the tourists feel the ground shaking, and panic immediately spreads. The Oni agent sees the opportunity, stepping in to evacuate them while everyone rushes out in fear. Moments later, Juji uses his scanning ability to confirm that all the tourists have been safely evacuated. With that assurance, Nato knocks knocks Holmer unconscious, which causes her titan to vanish instantly. As she lies in his arms, Holmer apologizes, saying she wasn't good enough. Nato gently tells her that she did just fine before she loses consciousness. Holding her close, Nato can sense the heavy darkness inside her heart, but he also believes that people like her will always find someone willing to pull them out of that darkness. Meanwhile, Jin is still locked in combat with Yomogi, dodging her relentless blocks of hardened bacteria. At one point, Yomogi traps him inside a bacteria cube, the walls pressing in on him until his body is nearly crushed. The box grows smaller and smaller, and Yomogi expects him to panic after all. Humans are known to fear tight spaces. With the cube now suffocatingly small, she is convinced Jin won't escape. But inside, Jin smirks and says it feels just like old times. In the next instant, to Yomogi's shock, he bursts out of the cube as chainsaws erupt from his back. Jin explains that cramped spaces don't bother him. He once slept inside the air ducts of an abandoned building, so compared to that, her little cube was practically a luxury. Yomogi grits her teeth in frustration. Seeing him withstand her attack enrages her, and she quickly begins plotting her next move. Suddenly, one of the Ugly's severed heads crashes into the room, and Akari strides in. He mocks the idea that they thought such a weak monster could defeat him. Looking at Yomogi, he declares that he'll be the one to take her down, but when he gets a closer look, he gets a little distracted, noticing how much skin she's showing despite being on duty as a Momotaro. Yomogi slams her hands into the ground, summoning more bacteria blocks. Ikari, however, finds them slow and predictable, weaving through them with ease. Yomogi is caught off guard by his speed and is forced to jump back to avoid a strike. Ikari's incredible agility comes from his blood eclipse release, devilish hysteria. This technique channels his anger to produce unpredictable effects, depending on his mood. The downside is that he can only use it 3 times a day. Yomogi narrows her eyes, realizing his fighting style could be troublesome. At the same time, Nato unleashes his own blood eclipse release, summoning multiple archers. They fire at the barrier, shattering it instantly. The entire agency shakes from the impact, and the Oni base begins to collapse. But Nato doesn't care. Saving their comrades' lives takes priority over the base. With the barrier destroyed, the agents rush inside toward their headquarters. Deeper in, Yomogi now finds herself cornered, surrounded by Oni agents with no escape. They tell her to surrender quietly. Ikari complains that they're interrupting just as the fight was getting interesting. Nato calmly reminds Yomogi that she's been fighting for hours without rest. She must be exhausted. With no way out, he urges her to give up, but Yomogi only smirks and rips off her shirt, declaring she'll never back down. Meanwhile, Tsubakiri's puppet continues its fight with Shiki. After struggling, Shiki finally manages to escape the puppet's gravitational field, realizing its area of effect is limited. He draws a special gun and fires, but the shots are useless. The puppet blocks them effortlessly with its field. Tsubakiri smirks and tells Shiki that the puppet has one more trick left. The puppet compresses the oxygen around them, condensing it to 100 times its normal density. This creates a massive oxygen sphere that weighs several tons. Tsubakiri says it's just like an iron wrecking ball, only far more powerful. The puppet launches it straight at Shiki. Upon impact, it unleashes a crushing shockwave, slamming hundreds of G's of force into Shiki's body. He coughs up blood and collapses. As Shiki writhes on the ground in agony, Tsubakiri sneers, calling him pathetic and saying there's no way he could be Kishin's child. But Shiki doesn't even know who that person is. Tsubakiri then explains, Shiki comes from the bloodline of Kishin, the most powerful Oni general in history. In other words, Shiki is Kishin's child. Meanwhile, Mei was still on her own in the bush when she remembered some of the things Shiki had told her, that she should never give in to despair, even when she felt the most scared. Those words gave her a little moral boost, so she slowly walked deeper into the building on her own. The scene then shifted to Sameder. One day, when he arrived at headquarters, everyone bowed in respect. There, he was introduced to his new vice captain, Hina Momoda, who had just been transferred from another branch. As Sameder continued to walk, Hina praised him for all the hard work he had done. Sameder quickly told her not to butter him up because he preferred to work alone, but Hina insisted that teamwork was one of the biggest rules of being a Momotaro. Later, as Sameder went to get his coffee in the lounge, Hina asked if he knew anything about the children of Kishin that people had been talking about. Being new here and coming from the countryside, she didn't really understand what it all meant. Sameder began explaining. A long time ago, there had been an Oni who nearly destroyed the Momotaro agency. That Oni was Kishin, widely known for impregnating women and passing on his power to the children they bore. Hina found it strange. If Kishin had so many kids, by now there should have been countless descendants of Kishin roaming around. But Sameder clarified that a child of Kishin referred only to those who actually inherited his power. Many did not, but history showed that at certain points, these children were indeed born. Just then, Captain Shinya suddenly appeared. adding that a child of Kishin was only born when the Momotaro side was dominating its Oni enemies. Hina was startled, wondering how Shinya had even appeared so suddenly. After greeting him, she admitted to herself that he had a frightening aura. Shinya arrogantly asked her if she knew the real reason why the war between the Oni and the Momotaro had been raging for the past millennium. His aggressive tone made Hina timid, saying he gave off heavy boss vibes. Shinya explained that the first Kishin had appeared right when their ancestors were about to obliterate the Oni. Since then, every time the Oni were pushed to the brink, a new Kishin-powered child emerged, which is why the war had never ended. He was furious at the thought that the Oni had now learned how to blend in with humans. He asked Hina if she understood why that was such a problem. Feeling picked on, she answered that it was because the Momotaro's mission was to protect humans from the Oni, and if humans found out about either side, it would be disastrous. Shinya yelled again, saying that was the obvious part. What mattered more was what came after. During their battles, innocent humans often got caught in the crossfire, and it was the politicians connected to them who had to clean up the mess. What angered Shinya most was how demanding those politicians were, never understanding how hard their job really was. Samadare urged Shinya not to yell at Hina because she clearly understood. Hina then spoke up, saying that the fact important people were helping probably meant they wanted to protect others as well. But Shinya dismissed her, saying it was the opposite. Those politicians only got involved so that they would be the first to be protected when everything eventually collapsed. Shinya then turned his focus to Samadare. Even if Shiki was one of the children of Kishin, losing to him, and even losing an arm, was disgraceful. Shinya mocked Samadare as an old bag of bones and suggested he resign and hand over his position. Hina watched nervously. Realizing things were getting tense, Shinya declared that he didn't care anyway. His plan was to rise through the ranks by killing every last one of the children of Kishin. Samadare spoke calmly, saying that Shinya could do whatever he wanted to the others, but Shiki should be left alone because he'll kill with his own hands. Shinya didn't argue further and simply walked away. Back at the Oni agency, Shiki was still being forced into the ground by the Oni zombies' gravity powers. Tsubakiri explained that there had always been exactly 8 children of Kishin, and Shiki was one of them. If his Kishin power were to awaken, he would become a serious threat, so they would need to kill him. However, Tsubakiri thought it would be more useful to study him instead. He planned to drag Shiki back half alive to his lab and use him as a test subject until there was nothing left to gain. Once the gravity effect was lifted, Shiki stood up but immediately began coughing and collapsed again, weakened. Tsubakiri admitted he was jealous of the Oni's regenerative abilities, something the Momotaro lacked. Summoning his remaining strength, Shiki stood again and shouted that he didn't care if he was Momotaro or not. He wasn't going to let them get away with this. He pulled out his Oni gun and fired, but the enemies dodged every shot. When his blood supply ran out, he collapsed, barely conscious. Tsubakiri scoffed, saying that if a child of Kishin couldn't even use their blood, then they were just a weakling. He noticed the building was about to collapse and decided to end things quickly, forcing Shiki into the ground once more. He then declared that he would start by killing Mei, who was hiding behind the wall. Mei stepped into the room and froze at the sight of Shiki's condition. Unable to believe her eyes, Shiki told her to run as fast as she could, but she remained paralyzed in shock. With trembling words, she asked Tsubakiri if this was how he had killed her mother and father. Mei told Tsubakiri that her parents had been innocent and had done nothing wrong, that they didn't deserve to die. Tsubakiri found it amusing that an Oni would form such close familial bonds. Shiki shouted at him to be quiet and called out to Mei, urging her to run away. Tsubakiri heard Mei's name and suddenly realized who she was, the daughter of the Oni couple he had killed. He began recounting how, right before he ended their lives, the couple hadn't begged for their own survival, but instead pleaded desperately for their daughter's life. At first, he had tricked them into thinking he would let her live, and the relief on their faces had been overwhelming. But then he had cruelly told them it was all a lie, that he would kill both them and their daughter. Mei fell to her knees in disbelief, tears streaming down her face, while Tsubakiri cackled, declaring that no Oni deserved to die peacefully. This horrific scene gave Shiki an adrenaline rush. Even under the crushing weight of the gravity force, he forced himself to stand. He told Mei not to cry because that was exactly what Tsubakiri wanted. Tears welled in his own eyes as he promised her that together they would defeat him, and afterward they would cry together, not apart. Tsubakiri laughed at the sight, confused at how Shiki could even cry in that moment. Shiki clutched at his chest and said it was because he had a heart. He admitted that when he first joined the agency, he had wanted to look away from Mei's pain, mostly because he knew all too well the agony of losing someone dear. It was because he had a heart that he could understand Mei's grief and her parents' regret. His tears flowed because of that understanding, and he told his enemies that they were the real monsters if they couldn't comprehend such feelings. Just then, Shiki noticed the Oni zombie preparing to kill Mei. He shouted at them to stop, and the the memory of his father's death came flooding back. Back then, he hadn't been strong enough to save him. Even now, when he thought he was finally strong enough to protect those he cared about, he felt like a weakling. He pushed himself to the limit, desperate to save Mei, and at that moment, his Kishin ability suddenly awakened. Flames roared to life around him. Every child of Kishin possessed a unique elemental attribute, and Shiki's was fire. This flame-wielding Kishin form was known as Inki. Tsubakiri was shocked to see such overwhelming power firsthand. Shiki himself was surprised by the surge, but quickly realized he could use it to fight. He clenched his fist, ready to stand tall, and declared his determination to end things here and now. With a confidence that hadn't been there moments before, Shiki unleashed a fiery blast that tore through Tsubakiri's right side. Tsubakiri was stunned. Just seconds ago, Shiki had been on the verge of death, drained of all energy. Yet somehow, with almost no blood left to use, he had landed such a devastating blow. The thought of what he could do at full capacity was terrifying. But Shiki's newfound strength quickly betrayed him. Unable to control the raging flames, he collapsed back to the ground. Tsubakiri laughed, realizing Shiki was still too weak to manage his power. He pinned him down once more with gravity, causing the inky flames to vanish, and turned his attention to Mei. He called her a nuisance and said death was all she was good for, promising to kill her just like her pathetic parents. Still struggling, Shiki shouted at him, demanding to know why he was acting like such a heartless monster. Mei and her family had never done anything wrong. They had simply lived peaceful lives. Tsubakiri didn't care. He decided it was time to finish Shiki once and for all. He summoned a massive energy ball, preparing to obliterate him. Even in his dire state, Shiki summoned enough strength to draw his Oni gun. Pointing it straight at Tsubakiri, with a final roar, he assured Mei that her life would be bright and full of hope from here on, as long as she held on. Tsubakiri hurled the energy ball toward him, but as Shiki fought back, Mei's desperate screams gave him another surge of adrenaline. His Kishin flames reignited, blazing stronger than before. Tsubakiri was stunned to see the flames return so suddenly, but he pressed on, forcing his energy ball forward. Mei's encouragement fueled Shiki, giving him the will to resist. He smirked, lifted his Oni gun, and fired. The shot shattered the massive energy ball, unleashing an explosion that engulfed Tsubakiri, who screamed in agony as he appeared to be obliterated. That was episode 10. Subscribe to not miss the next part and watch the next video on screen.